Hey everyone, my name is Sean Whitman and I'm here at House Fly Fishing in Hawley, PA. The pattern I'm going to tie for you today is called the Dummy Thicc Egg, and this is a great pattern for wintertime fishing. I like to fish it for steelhead here in our Great Lakes region. I also like fishing it for brown trout throughout the wintertime. It's probably a pattern that you can use as an attractor with or without a tungsten bead throughout the year, but I find myself fishing this one most during the winter time. So the hook I have in the vise here is a housefly jig short. It's paired with a 3.5mm housefly tungsten bead. It's a pink bead for this pattern. It kind of just goes with the color scheme of the rest of the fly. Another good substitute for this fly would be fulling mill tungsten bead or a fulling mill jig force short hook. The link for all these materials and hooks and different variations and substitutes will be listed in the description below with links. So the first thing I'm going to do here is, I've already attached my Danville 6/0 thread. This is like a fluorescent hot pink color. I've tied this in about to the halfway mark, and I'm actually just going to start by bringing my thread back up towards the bead. And then I'm going to take this loop tool here and I'm going to make a little loop which I'm going to use to put my fly foam in, and I'm actually going to double this loop over. So I'm going to do I'm going to double over the strands for this loop to make it a little bit extra strong. And I guess you could technically use like a 140 denier thread. But I like the 6/0 for the CDC collar that I'm going to tie in later, so that's the reason why I'm going with this doubled over 6/0 thread loop for the initial part of the fly. So I've got my McFly foam here. This color is called Cream Delight. I like a more pale egg personally for the most part, but we have tons of different colors available both in store and online. And they all work pretty well. I'm just using a pale color because this kind of suits my preference for the most part. So I'm going to start by kind of evenly pulling this McFly foam strand apart. And this is just one single strand cut into a piece that I can work with for the fly. And I'm just going to kind of try to evenly space the material out so that I can put it in my loop. I'm going to put it in my clamp here, and this is just like a random clamp from Hairline. You can get a lot of different clamps to do this with. A really popular one that we carry is the Stonfo material clips. So got this in my clamp, and I'm going to trim this so that it's pretty even length on either side of the clamp. It's probably going to be close to about, I don't know, 1/8 of an inch, maybe just a little shy of a quarter of an inch wide. You can make them a little bigger or smaller depending on what size egg you want to make, but I've left myself with enough room to put this material in my loop and clamp it. So I'm going to try to seat it up pretty close to the hook shank, about as close as I can get it. And I've just pinched that in my loop right in the center of the material, and I'm going to start to spin it now and tighten that loop up. So don't stress out if it doesn't look super pretty right away. We can brush it out and trim it up a little bit later if need be. Next, I'm going to take a little bit of Zap-A-Gap. This is the brush-on super glue, and I'm going to put this right on the top of the hook shank, and then I'm going to start to wrap this McFly foam over it. And this is going to help strengthen the fly. It'll be way more durable and last for a lot longer if you take the extra time to add a little bit of that super glue in. I'm just going to kind of preen the material rearward as I wrap it up towards the bead. And you can see it's already starting to take a really nice egg shape at this point. You'll get like some sloppy little bits that kind of hang off here and there that you can trim out later, but at this point it's already starting to look like an egg. You could totally fish this fly where it's at right now, but I'm going to add that little bit of a CDC veil that I was describing earlier on in the video. I'll show you guys how I add that in. So just kind of brushing all that material out to get some of the long straggly pieces to kind of pull out and orient towards the rear of the hook like I want them to. And then I'm just going to kind of pull off any extra long strands towards the rear and trim them. And you know, it's looking pretty good at this point. It's definitely in the shape of an egg. It's not as perfectly spherical as some other egg patterns, but the fish really eat this one well, I promise you. So now we're going to work on adding our CDC, and we're going to use another loop to do this. So I've got two pink CDC feathers here. They're kind of like a pale pink, and these are from Hairline. And as you can see, a single feather isn't super dense feather strand wise. So I'm gonna overlap these feathers. I'm gonna line up the stems, match the bend of the feather, and lay one on top of the other so that I can get a little bit more of a dense strip of material to pull off of this feather to put in my loop. So now I'm going to take that same clamp and I'm going to clamp the material and I'm going to trim it nice and close to the stem. Now I've got a good little section to work with there. I'm going to make another single strand loop here. I don't want to over bulk this part of the fly with my loop. So this CDC portion of the fly doesn't require a double stranded loop. And that's the reason why I just like using 6/0, because I can double the strength on the back end for the loop without having to, you know, tie off a thicker 140 thread and then tie in a 6/0 thread afterwards. Just kind of cuts down your tying process a little bit. So I'm going to stick this CDC right in the loop. And I'm going to try to push the butt ends towards the thread a little bit so that they're not protruding too far out. I'm even going to kind of try to carefully push this CDC a little bit closer to the hook shank so that my loop in the end isn't too over bulked with thread. I don't have to make quite as many wraps if I push this material down a little closer to the shank. And I'm going to twist this stuff up just like I did with the first loop we made. And I'm going to start to preen some of these CDC fibers rearward to orient them in the proper position when I start wrapping this. So now I'm going to just, at the head of the fly, make a few wraps. I'm going to keep pushing those fibers towards the rear as I wrap. And then I'm going to capture that loop with a wrap in front, 2 wraps in the back. Trim that thread off close. Now I'm going to take my little Velcro. You could use all kinds of different dubbing brushes for this. Stonfo makes another one. Giving Stonfo a lot of shout outs in this video, but they make some really nice tools. So now you can see I got that nice little CDC veil that goes over the entire length of the egg. And it's just about finished. I'm just kind of trying to preen this rearward and maybe make a couple more wraps of thread in front of that CDC and right on the bead there to make a little hot spot and kind of clean things up and make sure all my fibers are oriented rearward. And you can totally trim these fibers a little bit if you want to. I'm going to leave them long. I kind of like the way they look long on this particular pattern. So I'm really satisfied with the way things are looking. I'm going to do about a 1/4 inch section of Zap-A-Gap brush on super glue here, and then I'm going to whip finish that right onto the fly. And this is going to be a really durable egg that I know for a fact fish love to eat all winter long. Again, the material list and substitutions will be listed in the video description along with links to purchase. Thank you very much for watching this video.